Chapter 29. The Imperfect Subjunctive. Chapter 29 covers the following: the formation of the imperfect subjunctive in all conjugations, the subjunctive of sum esse in the present and imperfect tenses, the formation and use of result clauses, and at the end of the lesson we'll review the vocabulary which you should memorize in this chapter. There are 4 important rules to remember in this chapter. Rule 1. The imperfect subjunctive is formed by adding personal endings to the present active infinitive. I know, I'll explain it in a second. Rule 2. There is no future subjunctive. Rule 3. The base of the present subjunctive of sum is si. And Rule 4. Result clauses use the subjunctive. They are anticipated in the main sentence by tam, talus, tantus, ita, or seek, all so words, and in their own clauses are introduced by ut or ut non, nullus, nemo, nihil, and the like, but not ne. The existence of the imperfect subjunctive should be all the proof anyone needs that the subjunctive mood, just like the indicative, can change tense. And as you might expect from the term imperfect, this tense of the subjunctive shows past action. At the same time, it also signals that the verb represents action which is uncertain or is embedded in a subordinate clause which calls for the subjunctive. In terms of formation, the imperfect subjunctive is about the easiest type of verb we'll encounter in all of Latin. Take the present active infinitive, tack on personal endings, and ta-da! Imperfect subjunctive. Use active endings, it's active. Passive, it's passive. First, second, or third person, singular or plural, it's as easy as ducerem, duceres, duceret, that's the active, or in the passive, ducerer, ducereris, duceretur. What's not to love here? Even I see no reason to chart this out. But I can't help myself. I'm a teacher. I just feel naked without charts. So here's a chart with examples of one verb from each conjugation in the imperfect subjunctive active. Whew, I feel better. Hate that breeze. Now, let's turn me around and cover up my passives. Woohoo! I'm a Ramini. I find it hard to imagine anyone actually ever saying I'm a Ramini. Which means it's linguistics time again. Also, brutal truth hour. You know this is all a lie, right? You're not that easy to fool, are you? Come on, infinitives with endings? No way, that's a contradiction in terms. Infinitive means no ending. That's because infinitives don't take endings. No endings means no endings. So what's really going on here? What's really going on is that an archaic past tense subjunctive marker, se, has changed to re because it had a single s in between 2 vowels. Rhoticism. Remember rhoticism? That's the same process that produced the present active infinitive re ending. But the similarity between the present infinitive and the base of the imperfect subjunctive is totally superficial. The original infinitive se ending and the past subjunctive marker se arise from completely different sources. That they ended up looking alike is a coincidence. A happy coincidence, very convenient for Latin students, but utterly without linguistic basis. The Romans were not thinking y'all to love when they heard amaramini, if they ever heard it. No, they were thinking y'all were, in the past, being loved. Or y'all were being loved in a clause. They were thinking subjunctive with a -1 time value. That means a form like ducerem is best translated as I led. I did lead, subjunctively. But take careful note here. It's not necessarily I was leading or used to lead. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. Unlike the imperfect indicative, The imperfect subjunctive doesn't represent incomplete or repeated action in the past. Instead, it's used in a different way, which we'll address in the next chapter. For now, just translate it as any English -1 time value past tense form, with s in parentheses after it. To be honest, imperfect subjunctive is not a very good name for this tense, not that I know of a better one, which is beside the point because we're stuck with the name imperfect now. Just don't let it mislead you into thinking this tense form is actually imperfect. It's not. It's just past tense. In the present system, there are only two subjunctive tenses, the present and the imperfect. No future. Future subjunctive is another contradiction in terms, since the future indicative shows the speaker feels certain about the future, I will come, while the subjunctive shows uncertainty, I might come. One out of the three tenses missing? How can any student feel bad about that? The verb to be in Latin, sum esse, is, as you might expect, irregular in the subjunctive. Why not? It is everywhere else. But not as irregular as you might fear. The Romans used the subjunctive a lot, but not as much as the indicative. The subjunctive thus could support some irregularity, but not too much. In the present subjunctive, sum uses the base si, to which it adds personal endings. In the imperfect, it does exactly what it should. It adds personal endings to the infinitive esse, producing sim, sis, sit, simus, sitis, sint. That's the present. And essem, esseis, esset, essemus, essetis, essent. That's the imperfect. Possum, posse, to be able, follows suit. Possim, possis, possit, and so on in the present, and in the imperfect, possem, posses, posset, and so on. There's really only one thing to learn here. The present subjunctive of sum uses the base si. Everything else after that follows the rules. It's worth noting, however, one possible trap here. Possim with an I is the present subjunctive form. Possem with an E is the imperfect. A small but huge difference, especially when you think about their meaning. If sim means I am subjunctively, and essem I was subjunctively, then possim means I am able subjunctively, and possem I was able subjunctively. Possim, present, am or is. Possem, imperfect, was. Tattoo that backwards on your forehead so you see it every time you look in the mirror. Chapter 29 introduces a second type of subordinate clause which takes the subjunctive, the result clause, in which the speaker remarks on the consequences of something being or being done in some extreme degree, producing a notable result. For instance, you're so smart that you always understand everything I'm saying. And that's because you have such a quick mind that you get everything the first time I say it. Got it, Brainiac? Look closely, and you'll see that result clauses like the two above require three components. First, a sign or degree word in the main sentence, tripping off the possibility of expressing result. This sign word can take the form of anything that conveys a sense of so or such. In Latin, those are tam, ita, and sic, all meaning so, talus, which means such, and tantus, so great or so much. Next, there has to be a word for that. In Latin, ut, just like purpose. But the negator is different. Result can use any negative form. Non, nullus, numquam, anything except nay. No nay, ever with result. Tattoo that too on your forehead. And finally, the simplest element, a result clause needs a subjunctive verb. Here's an example. Tam mali erant, ut rem publicam tolerant, meaning they were so evil that, as a result, They destroyed the Republic. Note how this type of clause is negated. Tam mali erant ut republicam servare non possem, meaning, they were so evil that I could not save the Republic. Ut plus non, not nay. Besides tam, those other sign words we mentioned above can also introduce a result clause. For instance, tantus. Tantum scripsimus ut nemo librum totum legere posset. We wrote so much that no one could read the whole book. Note the use of the negator nemo. That's okay, just not nay. Sometimes, however, the sense of a sentence alone can trip off a result clause if the thought involves some sort of extreme situation. In other words, result clauses usually have sign words, but not always. For example, librum longissimum scripsimus ut nemo totum legeret. We wrote a very long book, with the result that no one read the entire thing. So any words that have a natural sense of elevated degree can at times serve as sign words. That obviously includes superlatives like longissimum in the sentence above. One last thing to note about this construction is that the Romans didn't distinguish between real and potential result. Real result shows what actually transpired. For example, I was so tired that I fell asleep. That's right, I really did nod off and drool all over my keyboard as I was listening to this boring lecture on result clauses. Versus, I am so tired that I could fall asleep any second now. True, I haven't actually fallen asleep yet, but I'm so tired, and this presentation is so boring, my potential result... Oh no, I think it's happening. My potential result has become a real result. Clearly, the Romans didn't feel the need to clarify through grammar these very different types of thought. For instance, they could have used the indicative for real result and the subjunctive for potential result. That's the way the ancient Greeks did it. But by Roman times, the subjunctive had begun to be so closely associated with subordination versus uncertainty that as a result, it was used in all result clauses, potential or not, because that's what the subjunctive was coming to mean. I may feel somehow uncertain about the truth of what I'm saying, but I know I'm in a clause. So the lack of a distinction between real and potential result in Latin can only mean the Romans relied on context to separate these two inherently different types of thought. The same way they trusted context to show whether ut introduces result or purpose. Note that, just as with reflexives, Latin tends not to overmark what doesn't need to be said. Get to the point? Could have, should have been a Roman motto. So let's do that. Vocabulary. The first word is mens mentis feminine, meaning mind, thought, or intention. Its third declension, feminine, and its I stem, monosyllabic with two consonants at the end of the base. So what's its genitive plural? Mentium, good. Next word, miles militis, masculine, meaning soldier. Third declension masculine, and it's not I stem. Nor is it an Indo-European word. There's nothing like it in any other Indo-European language. So the Romans must have picked it up somewhere. Did it come from one of their neighbors in Italy? The Etruscans, perhaps, who lived on the Romans' northern border? They made an enormous impact on pre-classical Roman culture, and miles does indeed fit a pattern seen in other Latin words borrowed from Etruscan, like veles velitis, meaning light-armed soldier, and sateles satellitis, meaning bodyguard. The next word is an adjective, duris meaning hard, harsh, rough, stern, or unfeeling. Its first second declension. Nothing more to say about this word, so on to the next. Tantus meaning so large, so great, or of such a size. It too is first second declension. This is one of the sign words we discussed above, which can introduce a result clause. Tantus is the pair word, the technical term is correlative, of the question word quantus meaning how much. That is, quantus asks how much, and tantus answers that much. Tantus is also paired with talis tale, meaning so, such, or of such a quality, a third declension I-stem adjective. Tantus refers to the size of something, talis to its quality or makeup. English inherited that same sensibility via our Latin derivatives quantity and quality. Please add talis tale to your vocabulary list. It's an essential word to know in Latin. The next word is another of those sign words. The adverb ita, meaning so or thus. Like tantus, it can introduce a result clause. This is the so or thus, which is attached to adjectives. He is so foolish. Or adverbs. He acts so foolishly. Or even directly to verbs. The fool acts thus, or in such a way, that, as a result, nobody believes a word he says. Like tantus and quantus, ita and ut are correlatives, literally, as, so, or how, ... thus. For example, ut doctus ita canis segeret, meaning, as it was taught, thus a dog will behave. A veritable synonym of ita is seek, also meaning so or thus. Ita and seek are virtually interchangeable in Latin, except that seek is used almost exclusively with verbs, and like tantus, talis, and ita, it's a sign word introducing a result clause. As is tam, meaning so, or to such a degree, the last of the 5 words in this vocabulary list, which often kick off result clauses. Unlike seek, however, tam is used exclusively with adjectives or adverbs, never with verbs. Next up is quidem, another adverb, meaning certainly, at least, or even. It's often post-positive, that is, it comes second in the sentence, and it's sometimes combined with ne, producing the idiom ne quidem, meaning not even, where ne and quidem usually surround the word they modify. For example, ne veritas quidem nos servare nunc potest, meaning not even the truth can save us now. Be careful not to confuse this word with quidam. What does quidam mean? That's right, a certain person, some person. It's a pronoun and changes form as it declines. Quidem, the adverb, certainly, never changes form. The next word is a verb, disco discere didici, meaning learn. Its third conjugation. Be careful. Disco, learn, is the opposite of dokeo, teach. They look alike and are easily confused. And I'll answer your question before you ask it. No, this is not where we get our word discus or disco, as in discotheque. I'm sure there are many things a person can learn in a disco. Probably a frightening number of things, but Latin isn't one of them. Look at the perfect didici. It's reduplicated, but not with the usual E, with I. Note also, there's no fourth principal part. That's because there's no passive at all for this verb. Just like English, in Latin, you can't be learned nothing. So how would Latin say, they will learn? What conjugation is disco? Third. And how does third conjugation form its future tense? With E. So what's the answer? Discent. And the final word in this vocabulary list is discipulus discipuli masculine, meaning learner, pupil, or student. It's a second declension masculine noun. Discipulus comes from the same base as disco and produces our derivative disciple, a person who is learning something. How would Latin say for the students? Good. Discipulis. Do the rules that were cited at the beginning of this chapter now make sense to you? If not, please review this presentation. If so, please proceed to the next slide. For the next class meeting, please bring in a copy of the worksheet for Chapter 29. Here's a link to that worksheet. Amor tuus Latinae tantus sit ut plurima discatis, o discipuli cari.